This crowd rises to its feet. Okoro slammed it home. Garland left wing, 3-ball. Perfect! Garland went to the lane, lobbed to Mobley. Pow! And Allen blocked the shot at the rim. Pow! With the left hand and a foul.
Welcome to the Chase Down Podcast, part of the Cavs media family. I'm your host, Justin Rowan. The Chase Down is presented by Fubo TV. Watch over 100 channels of live sports and TV for half the cost of cable. There's no contract and no commitment. Try for free at FuboTV.com. Where has the time gone? It is the final week of the NBA regular season. The Cavs magic number is down to 1. Not the most fun weekend for Cavs basketball with a high-scoring game against the New York Knicks, but the Cavs put it together. Jared Allen returned and got a big win over the Indiana Pacers. And joining me today to discuss it is my co-host, Carter Rodriguez. Carter, how you doing, buddy?
Doing well. Not the prettiest win against the Indiana Pacers that you ever did see. But Justin, as they say, they don't ask how, they ask how many. And ultimately a 10-point win that, didn't feel like a 10-point win, but at this point, I feel like the team is fighting up against a lot of different interesting currents. They're fighting against apathy because they know they've got the playoffs coming, and that's obviously eating a lot of their attention. They're fighting against injury, with Okoro banged up, and up until the Indy game, no Jared Allen, so ultimately I'll take the win, it's a weird stretch of the season, which is weird to say with only 3 games left.
Yeah, with how competitive this season has been, it's kind of surprising to find yourself in a spot where the Cavs really aren't playing for anything. I know going into the Indiana game, they needed 2, right? They needed either 2 wins or Knicks loss, some combination of that. But at the end of the day, kind of looking at the schedule, you kind of know, like, there's no real suspense of whether or not they're going to get the 2. Obviously, it's nice to get that win against Indiana. And it definitely felt like a flip the switch game, where they were kind of coasting a little bit. And frankly, I didn't love the effort in that Knicks game either. I thought they kind of came out expecting that our shooting is going to be sustainable and the Knicks are going to cool off at some point. They're playing without Julius Randle. And honestly, it's been a consistent trend throughout this season that when the opposing team has a star player out or has their best player out, which was the case, I'd say, with both the Knicks and the Pacers games, Cavs can have a tendency to not exactly rise to the occasion, to not come out with their fastball. And credit to them, I guess, in the Pacers game, that when they turned it on, they were awesome. The third quarter and fourth quarter defense especially was phenomenal. It was the kind of lockdown gear that you expect this team to have. But against the Knicks, it was just another one of those instances of, well, we expected them to go cold at some point, but they're just in a rhythm. They're getting what they want. And while both teams had outlier shooting games, the Knicks just had a little bit more firepower in that one.
Yeah, well, I think like that Knicks game is like the ultimate blend of, shot making and scheme and execution, as a very unhappy cocktail for the Cavs. I didn't love Lamar starting on Jalen Brunson at all. I don't think we've ever seen Lamar be a great shifty guard defender. Brunson also made a ton of hard shots over Lamar. So even when he didn't cook him, he was scoring.
Know what it actually reminded me of? Sorry to cut you off, but it reminded me of Isaac last season, where I thought Lamar actually did a pretty good job staying in front of Brunson, but he was doing nothing to disrupt his rhythm, right? Like Jalen Brunson was getting into the spots in his rhythm, and Lamar was contesting rather than making him uncomfortable. And that was a big step forward for Okoro this season, being more of a disruptive force on the defensive end. And I think that's why you see across the board the point of attack defensive metrics for him are all way up this year. I did not like the decision to start Lamar on Brunson. I get why they did it, just kind of mimicking the Okoro thing, but he did a better job than I expected. I just didn't really have high hopes because I think Lamar's best matchup is more of those kind of 4-3 strong players that are looking to get to the rim where he can really put his body into guys.
Yeah, and so I couldn't agree more, and I do think that's kind of where the third piece comes in, which is general execution. I also thought the Cavs played a bad game. I thought there was a lot of bad effort too. I tweeted that I thought that was Donnie's worst defensive game as a Cavalier. Yeah, he was just getting turned. The corner was getting turned, my friend. You know, the footwork was very bad. He was a little, he was either sluggish or lungy, where he was just kind of hopping out of position when he was in good position. And I feel like that kind of applied everywhere on the roster. I thought this was another instance where I think both of us kind of felt like sometimes JB will go out of his way to hide Darius when he doesn't have to. I kind of talked in the past about how that Hawks play-in game, I think we kind of broke our defense to avoid putting DG on the point of attack on Trey. And, it worked for a half, and then by the time they figured it out, it's like, hey, how about we just play a little more straight up than continuing to beat our head against the wall here. And I kind of feel like the Cavs' best success against Brunson in that game were when they just had Darius or Howell Neto guarding Brunson. And I think one thing that's underrated, and you've talked about it a little bit, is when you do let Darius be the point of attack, especially while this team is playing these really small lineups, Jetty at the 4, Isaac at the 4, Karras at the 4, it's really, really hard to take what little remaining size you have and put it at the front of the defense. Because all of a sudden your help defender Darius is your help defender, and he's just not a big guy. So like I just felt like the scheme, the effort were not where they needed to be. And then Jalen Brunson also shot the cover off the ball. And like that trio is why you give up a career high 48 to a guy who, does not live in the 48-point territory that often. It's not like he's constantly flirting with 48 and he just happened to get there this time. Like it was a collapse on all levels, and it was an outlier.
It was an outlier for both teams. It was nuts. And I agree with the spirit of what you're saying with Darius Garland, where sometimes I definitely agree it's not necessary to kind of go out of your way to hide him. He's done such a good job staying connected to his man. The one area of growth I'd say on the defensive end, seeing as we're here, I'd say he could do a little bit better of a job contesting 3-pointers and getting out and contesting those looks, but staying with guys, preventing guys from getting to the rim, fighting through screens. I think he's shown a ton of growth, and I think he's done a really good job of that this year. What I would say about this matchup, though, is when we see the Knicks in the playoffs, because that looks like the likely matchup in the 4 or 5 series here. I don't even know if it's possible for anything else to occur at this point.
I think there is like the slimmest of chances. I took a cursory look this afternoon while I was chasing my daughter around. And Knicks are 2.5 games up. I don't know who has the tiebreaker, but it's darn close. And the Knicks have a pretty soft schedule the rest of the way.
Yeah. In this matchup, I think this is a spot, though, where you would ask Darius to guard Quentin Grimes. And that's not hiding him. Like, Grimes is someone that can get going. And honestly, Grimes has had a better season than RJ Barrett. I thought he did a good job on Grimes. And in this matchup, you would be putting Okoro onto Brunson, assuming that Okoro's healthy, which we'll get to that later. And then you have Donnie maybe on Josh Hart, maybe on RJ Barrett. He's the one that you would be hiding in these matchups. And I'm sure New York will go and try to get those switches and test Donnie in those spots. And he's going to need to be ready for that. But I kind of understand not necessarily really changing the game plan of what you would normally do in this individual matchup, because as much as it could have locked up the 4 seed in that game, you also don't really want to show too much against the Knicks, right? Like, you don't want to get into stuff. And frankly, like, my interest in the game and like my general angst, and I was actually having a very angsty Friday night, Carter. I was having a very angsty Friday. I was having a bad day. And normally when the Cavs have a tough performance on a day that I have a bad day, I feel very angsty. As soon as Robin Lopez checked in the second quarter, I'm like, oh, we're not giving our fastball tonight. We're going deeper in the bench. Everybody's getting a little bit of a shot. And if we end up getting the win here, that's great. Obviously, the starters are still going to play heavy minutes, but my level of seriousness watching the game went down. And I don't know if that's fair to Rolo or not, but he just hasn't played a lot of high leverage minutes this season.
No, you're absolutely right, and I don't think they were. This was not their fastball, so to speak. But also, you just want to see execution be good, even if you're not throwing your best effort at a team. And I just don't think they did that today, or that in that game, and that's okay. Ultimately, I think we're gonna see better from them. And I think we're gonna see a much better punch. Did you leave that game just going like, man, they need Isaac Okoro? or did you kind of leave it going, well, they just have to play better?
Obviously the Okoro thing, like I was feeling a little, annoying, like being annoying, and of course I made my jokes about, well, where's all the people that want to get rid of Jared Allen and Isaac Okoro now? So there was that aspect of it, but I was trying to figure out real takeaways, and some of them I did think it was interesting, especially after the podcast that we did with Andrew, that Tibbs did go the smaller route, right? That he was playing 4 perimeter players around Mitchell Robinson. And that was something that we weren't sure whether or not they were going to do. And that's something that if Randall is out for some or all of the series, it's going to be interesting if the Knicks do go small, how the Cavs deal with that. And obviously Brunson had the majority of the volume shooting in that game, and it's easy to kind of just point at, okay, Isaac Okoro, you can put him on there. He's done a terrific job on Brunson all season. I think it's easy to fall in that trap, but there were some concerns, and I'm interested if you had any concerns from it, but especially after you pointed out kind of the struggles that the Cavs have had on the defensive glass, that really came through. And obviously Jared Allen helps, but even when Jared Allen is back, even if the starting lineup rebounding numbers are good, we are still going to have these stretches where it's only one of them on the court. And when you do have all of these wings that are very, very good, tenacious rebounders on New York, that's going to be something that's really going to test the Cavs, and it's going to need to be a team effort.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That freaks me out. I was freaked out before the game, and watching Mitchell Robinson pull in 9 offensive rebounds, did nothing to assuage those fears. I think
big word. I don't know. Assuage?
Yeah. I have a college degree, pal. I think that ultimately you've done the homework. You know that when the two bigs are on the floor together, the defensive rebound rate is good. Mm-hmm. And again, this just kind of keeps going back to the fact that, like, whether it's fair to ask of him or not, and the answer is probably it's not. I just don't see a world where Jared is not being asked to play around 40 minutes a game in the postseason. I think the core 4 are all going to be hovering around 40 minutes unless they just happen to take care of business early in games, which really hasn't been their MO, to be honest. There have been a ton of games where they just get to, send in the cavalry at the 6-minute mark of the fourth, because almost no one gets to do that. But I just think, like, you're not going to be able to survive on the glass against some of these teams, and especially against the Knicks, where that's so important for them to have a functioning offense. If the Cavs are scheming better and executing better, like I think you're going to see some really ugly offensive ratings for New York in a postseason series, mm-hmm. and their road is generating extra shots, extra possessions, extra free throw line attempts. They also shot 11 more free throws in that game, mind you. So I think that's the kind of stuff that jumps out at me. The rebounding jumps out at me, and then ultimately, I think Lamar had a really rough game against New York, mm-hmm. and I do think it's worth noting. Like, I keep mentioning this, but if you had told me Lamar was a possible or likely playoff rotational player at the beginning of the year, I would have said, like, this is, that might be overtaxing him. And we saw it where he was catching the ball with advantage a few times against New York, and Hartenstein just took his lunch money twice at the rim. And I worry a little bit about this team's depth because, I did that little tier list that you yelled at me on Twitter about. And while the Cavs were 4 of the top 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, felt like they were all Knicks. The Knicks have depth even without Randall. And they do play physically to take might take out some of take the Cavs out of the game a little bit. And as I've said, the bench just cannot tank them. And it was hard. The Lamar minutes were hard, and he started. So if Isaac isn't right, Lamar's going to be playing in the postseason. I just think we might see him get a little overtaxed in that construct.
Yeah, it definitely was interesting, and I thought Neto gave them better minutes than Rubio again, and I don't know if that's something that maybe JB has a shorter leash in the playoffs. Maybe we just go Karis LeVert essentially as the third guard in those spots, and you're playing Jetty Osman on the wing. And I mean, it's interesting.
The thing is, if you do that, you got to play Lamar because you can't run a 7-man rotation unless you're like in a game 7.
Here's the thing, though. When you're looking at the rebounding numbers for the Cavs, and those two big lineups with Mobley and Allen, they're about an 83rd percentile for defensive rebounding. When you look at the individual kind of pairings with those guys, the ones that are actually strong on the glass contain either Karis LeVert or Dean Wade. And I think the most significant development that we have is Dean Wade playing significant minutes, because I think, especially we know what Lamar's going to bring on the offensive end of the floor. If Dean's at least shooting with a little bit of confidence, I think what he brings defensively overall, and both as a rim protector and as a switchy, larger body, I think that that's going to be really valuable within a rotation. Because if you're talking about shrinking the rotation, assuming Okoro's healthy and we get our normal starting 5, if you're shrinking down to an 8-man rotation that's Karis LeVert, Jetty Osman, and Dean Wade, and maybe like a sprinkling of Lamar or Ricky, depending on the matchup, depending what you need, I feel a whole lot better about that. And frankly, I was not expecting to be going into this final week of the season unsure of kind of what the rotation is going to look like, because in my mind, I had already kind of written off getting Dean production for this season. And obviously the Okoro injury is something that's on the forefront of my mind as well. But seeing Dean Wade go out there for 27 minutes against the Pacers and, rotate well defensively, even the play that he had on RJ Barrett, where he blocked him on the drive, wasn't using his hands, the willingness to take shots against Indy, it just looks better. It doesn't look like there's necessarily the same hitch. And if they can get even 85% of what Dean Wade was before the shoulder injury, I do think what he can bring on the glass, just from a size perspective, the rim protection as well. I think we saw that many times against Indiana where he's able to rotate down and protect the rim. I think that is a major development if they are able to get meaningful minutes from Wade, because we've talked about it a million times. When he's healthy and he's right, he's a major role player that can contribute to this team and help out. So seeing him get 27 minutes, that has my interest peaked.
Yeah, I first off, completely agree. I don't think either of us thought we were seeing Dean play a meaningful minute the rest of the season, the rest of the regular season at minimum. As he kind of still is struggling to come back from injury, as the 3-point jumper had fallen off. And I think he's been okay. I don't think he's been great.
Nope.
He's 2 of 5 from 3 in 40 minutes in the last 2 games.
40%, baby.
Yeah, 40%. Count the numbers. But the fact that, and we talk about the fact that we're not so sure about Lamar. Well, and we're not so sure about Ricky. Well, if you do play Karis those backup 1 minutes, and again, knowing that Donnie is definitely playing 42 minutes a game, he just is. Which so there aren't that many that you need to cover, but there are some. If you do excise Rubio, and you're sure you want to play Jetty, which I'm still not sure JB's 100% sure of that, it almost starts to make me wonder: is he just going to be playing a little grab bag with the bench, trying to guess who's going to help based on the matchup and having a hook if they're not showing it. I know that's not exactly optimal conditions to play basketball under. If you're one of these role guys that's like, well, if I miss my first two or we give up a run when I get on the floor, am I going to get bounced for the rest of the series? You might. JB's going to have to try some stuff and see who sticks, see who's ready, and that might include
frankly, that's playoff basketball, right?
Yeah.
Like we've seen really good players follow the rotation. We saw that happen with Grant Williams. We saw the Bucks, like Grayson Allen plays big minutes for them. He fell out of the rotation, right? Like I think it wouldn't surprise me for Lamar to come into a game and give them good minutes because we've seen it dozens of times throughout like his tenure with the Cavs, right? Like he can go out there. What makes me uncomfortable is if you're in a position to necessarily like count on him, especially because he does provide something different defensively than what Isaac does, right? Like Isaac is so much more of a point of attack defender, right? And he's someone that you can throw onto the guards, especially as you're kind of rotating throughout your rotation. So yeah, just I think if we're looking at kind of like the ideal 8-man rotation, like I think the three off the bench, if Wade is healthy, it would be Karras, Jetty, and Wade to me, because I think they bring something unique that the rest of the starting lineup doesn't necessarily have, right? Like for Karras, it's...
And they all plug in to what the starting lineup does.
Right, and they all plug in. They all, like, Jetty will give you movement shooting. Karras gives you a 6'7" guy that can run a pick and roll, good playmaking. We see what he can do on the defensive end as well. That microwave shot making that's so important for a playoff series. And Dean Wade, that rare guy that can defend 3 through 5, maybe knock down some shots, but he's going to make the right play, and he's never going to have a record scratch, right? Like he's never all of a sudden going to say, oh God, I have Josh Hart on me, I'm going ISO here, right? Like we might see him turn down shots. Like I think if he's getting the hook, it's going to be as a result of turning down the shots that he should be taking. But I don't think that he's necessarily going to have kind of the YOLO possessions that we see from a Jetty or even from Lamar at times.
No, I would tend to agree. And like really all I want from JB at this point, because like, the silver bullet is not coming in the next 3 games where it's like, oh, now we know who JB is definitely going to be able to count on. And again, I still think you can throw Isaac into that group of play. Until I see it work in the postseason, I'm gonna at least have my eye on it. And but what you want is enough folks to throw at that wall. Because there will be players who just don't have it for series, for games, for whatever it might be. And this is postseason ball, and if Lamar comes out there and provides an energy burst, he's probably going to get 20 minutes in that game. And if he comes out there and the athleticism and speed seems too much, and everyone else's try hard is ramped up to his level of try hard, and then maybe he's not going to get to play, and JB will try out Wade or whoever it might be. I think we're going to see. I mean, if you think about just who's going to get like real competitive minutes in a first round series with the Knicks, I would set the over under at 10.5. Because I just don't think JB is going to be orthodox about this, because we just know that doesn't work. We know that like how many times have we watched playoff series where we go, yeah, that guy who's played all year is not going to work here. And I think it's the Cavs have more variance than most. So Danny Green might be the break glass in case of emergency guy. I hoped we'd get to see him have some run before we get there, and we still might. But bad
timing for those health and safety protocols for him.
No kidding. So ultimately, I do think we're going to see a ton of bodies, and I think the Lamar performance in that Knicks game was kind of endemic of that. Just in terms of like, I just don't want him to be overexposed. But JB does have some options. I think the Dean minutes are very meaningful in that regard.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we'll see who ends up being kind of those valuable contributors who you can count on, but at least we do know for video conferencing, we can count on the support of Zoom. Support for this podcast and the following message comes from Zoom. 500,000 businesses connect using Zoom, a single platform for phone, chat, workspaces, events, apps, and video. Zoom enables real-time collaboration for teams around the globe. Zoom, how the world connects. Carter, it is almost It is almost time. I can't believe the regular season is running up on us, that this is the last week. I'm very excited for postseason basketball. I'm not excited. Like, even if the miraculous run happens and the Cavs are playing all the way to June, I just don't like the idea of not having 3-4 Cavs games every single week. And that's already freaking me out. But I gotta admit, I'm starting to get just a little bit nervous about this Isaac Okoro injury. He is out again Tuesday against the Orlando Magic, and it certainly does seem like they're playing it safe to some extent with his knee. It's being described as soreness. JB's quote after the game, courtesy of Chris Fedor, was, "We need to get him into a place better than he was. If Isaac doesn't play, it's because he's in real discomfort. We've got to make sure we're taking those steps to get him to a place of comfort and safety. That's more important. It's something we've been monitoring every day, and hopefully he continues to improve." The key line in there for me is that we got to get him to a place better than he was. And to me, that sounds like a guy that's been playing through discomfort. Credit to him. I don't think it was really apparent when you saw him out there on the court, but I do remember, like, going into those Brooklyn games where, you know, he hit that big shot. It did seem like he was getting a little more quiet than that early run when he was in the starting lineup, right? Like, you noticed that the volume of shots was coming down a little bit, and there were stretches where you didn't notice him as much offensively, which was kind of the norm prior to him entering the starting lineup, but it was something that we were at least monitoring. But I mean, on the one hand, it feels good. It feels good that Isaac Okoro has played to a point where we feel concerned if he's not 100% going into a playoff series. It feels good that, like, he seems to be our best answer for the next best player that's going to be available in this series, right? Like, on the other hand, it's concerning because there's nobody else that does.
He's the best answer for what the Knicks do. Yeah.
And our only answer, really. Like, he's the only one that provides this exact skill setting and does it at this level.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it is concerning. I'm certainly getting to the point where I'm a little worried. Here's the devil's advocate. You know, well, probably the angel's advocate, I guess. Whatever it is, the more positive spin. Here's the reality, Justin. First day of the playoffs, I believe, is the 15th. Please confirm. So the earliest the Cavs really, 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 really need Isaac Okoro is 12 days from now.
Mm-hmm.
Isaac is also, you know,
he's already had over a week off.
Yeah, he's one of the hardest workers on the team, and is young and is a great athlete. I'm not terribly worried about his conditioning. I think he's going to be smart. You know, the Cavs training staff is really smart. You know, I'm sure they're going to be getting him that low impact cardio in the meantime to make sure, you know, he's not losing his wind while he's resting that knee. And ultimately, like, they just should not need him to win one more game and basically shut it down. I really think it's important. I know we're going to talk about the Orlando games, but if I'm JB, I'm like, fellas, let's just go freaking win tomorrow. Because if you take care of business tomorrow, you have locked in the 4 spot. Again, is their magic number is 1. They got to win one game, or Knicks have to lose one game to lock up that 4 spot. And then everyone who's even nursing a little thing can chill. You know, I think that, and if you're an avid listener to the podcast, you might be thinking, Carter, that's a heck of a different tune than you were whistling just like a week and a half ago. And yeah, it is. It's a complete reversal. But the team,
we lost 2 games.
Yeah, we lost 2 games. Isaac wasn't hurt before. Jarrett wasn't hurt before. And like, that was kind of my big fat caveat I kept hitting, was like, barring injuries, I think they should just try to win as many games as they can. But guess what? They're injured now. Or at least we know about those injuries now. And I think even if they're not 100% going into a Knicks series with Julius Randle's status in question, I think they should advance out of that series. But like, you know, you want to give Boston the best shot you can Milwaukee best shot you can if you get there. And obviously there's no guarantee they get there. Knicks are well coached, and clearly I
was going to shame you for skipping steps.
Yeah.
I don't appreciate that.
But like, you have to think, like, they have to go back into thinking long game. in my opinion, based on how this has played out. That's kind of where I'm at. Again,
Yeah.
there is no guarantee they beat the Knicks, so I'm knocking on some wood and apologizing to the basketball guys for even entering the thought experiment. But yeah, so I really want to see them take care of business and just let everyone who's nursing something, give Jared a couple extra game. Again, if you win tomorrow, that's 11 days off for everyone who really needs it, and that's basically like, think about how much we look towards a thing like an All-Star break and go, oh man, whoever's nursing something, once we get to All-Star break, that's going to be so good for them. Cavs get their own little mini All-Star break here if they take care of business tomorrow.
Yeah, and for Okoro dealing with the knee soreness, like whether that's a tendon issue or whatever the case may be, like it's 3 weeks off. Like in all likelihood, you're probably still going to be dealing with some discomfort. Reality is everybody is going to be somewhat banged up going into the playoffs. Nobody's fully healthy after 82 games, but you can at least hope that he's going to be in a better, state to contribute, that there's going to be less discomfort for him. And who knows, maybe however long he is out for is enough to actually rectify that, and that it is going to be fine. But it definitely is nice on the one hand that we are at a point where we feel like we really need Isaac Okoro, and we recognize his value. It does definitely feel like, even though it wasn't officially locked up, that the Cavs have been playing it safe, right? Like Jared Allen dealing with the soreness that he had, Isaac with the soreness he had, resting them for those Atlanta and Knicks games. Even though you could in theory say, hey, these are like big games. We're still like, pushing for the 3 seed. Feels like they took the right approach and understood, hey, we still have enough to win these games, which they did. They could have won the Hawks game. They could have won the Knicks game with better execution in both of those games, even with those 2 out. But, just playing it safe, giving these guys their best chance to be 100% or as close as realistically possible for the playoffs, I think is the priority, because they're really going to need Isaac Okoro. Like it's a thin rotation as it is, and losing a key piece that you figure is going to play at least like 28 minutes a night in the playoffs. You can't have that.
No, you cannot. So really, really interested, keeping an eye on it. This might be a thing where, like, why were we so worried about Isaac Okoro? He had some minor knee soreness, and the Cavs were smart to not play him before the play. So we just don't know. We won't know.
What would you put the over under at? Like 30-40% of what we say is basically irrelevant 2 weeks later?
Well, that's like our base. That's our base margin for error on everything, Justin. So let's not get into that. That's not a thread on the sweater I want to pull. Is how often we are just big wrong.
Oh, I like pulling on that thread, but you know what? You're going to keep me away from those good habits. But you know what? Let's move from that to what I think is better news. Even though it's not 100% official yet, there are indications that there is going to be a new collective bargaining agreement, and that there is going to be labor peace in the NBA, which, we talked about how much we're already missing the basketball that's not gone. I think the idea of a lockout would be something that would really depress the living hell out of me. And some of the early reporting, it's interesting, man. Like there were aspects of it that I probably overreacted to already. Like you look at the stuff about, gambling and all that, it's something that, as more guardrails are being announced and more information's coming out, I'm like, why was I overreacting? Why am I being dumb? So I'll be interested to see what the actual details are there. But there are things that impact the Cavs. And, we have an in-season tournament potentially as soon as next year. That's interesting. There are no longer limits to the designated rookie max extensions, which is obviously significant given that both Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are on them, which, I mean, that was one of the questions that people had when the Donovan Mitchell trade happened was, is this going to delay when you can give Mobley a new contract? And
yeah, I don't think people understood, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Justin, because I am, not only am I no cap or CBA expert, I'm also just not very well read. But with that said, correct me if I'm wrong. Prior to this reported change, the Cavs would have been able to offer Mobley this deal, but it would have had to be like at the end of his rookie deal, because they had to wait for the Donnie one to basically flip into a new contract, right? If he opted out and they signed him to a new thing, then things open up or something like that.
Yeah, it would be a limit on the ability to give him the 5-year extension rather than a 5-year new deal. That's why we were able to give Jared Allen a 5-year contract rather than the 5-year extension.
Got it.
I think
it just pushes things back a little bit in a weird way.
Yeah, and I think there would have been some monetary differences as well. I'm not 100% there, so I won't even speak to it, but that's no longer an issue. And obviously that's interesting from a team building standpoint too. Like, look how many deals were held up this past offseason because teams couldn't
Ben Simmons
offer.
Contract.
The Ben Simmons one is a prime one. Like, Kevin Durant could have been in Miami if Bam Adebayo was eligible to be traded to Brooklyn, right? Like, you never know how that could have gone. So that's certainly an interesting thing from a team building standpoint. But what really seems to be, when I listen to the smart people that are actually like digging into this and all the podcasts, what this seems to say is there's going to be upper spending limits. There's going to be limitations on what you can do when you've invested in a team in terms of adding guys in free agency. But it really, really incentivizes drafting, developing, keeping those guys. If you're going to have 3 designated rookie extension guys, you better be very sure about those 3 guys because there's going to be complications with team building. And for the Cavs, it's pretty nice that we already know, like, we feel great about the Garland extension. He's having, the best season of his career. Donovan Mitchell, I don't think anybody's displeased with how great he's been this year. And Evan Mobley's pretty much a no-doubter. And we know that they play well with these role guys. But I do think that it really does seem to put an emphasis on retaining players, drafting, developing, even the addition of an extra 2-way. There's going to be 3 2-ways, Carter.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, especially with some of the draft and stash equity that the Cavs have, like, Khalifa Diop or Luke Travers. Maybe you don't burn a 2-way spot on them if you're not 100% sure they're ready, but maybe you do now that you have a third spot coming. So, again, all this is just to remind everyone, this is all reported. We don't know if all this will end up coming to pass, so we are just going off the information we have. But yeah, a lot of good news for the Cavs. It does feel like there was a lot of guardrails put against those, the Omega spenders, which, like, I think
it does actually hurt that.
Yeah, because the Cavs have once been an Omega spender. That is a rare small market advantage that the Cavs had over their other small market brethren, was that you had Dan Gilbert. Who was a great spender when the team was a contender, and really always has been. So that's certainly interesting. Can I quickly opine on the end season tournament?
Oh, sure, go off,
guys. If you were to design a league from scratch, none of you would do. Yeah, go ahead and just get your phone out. Yeah, none of you would just schedule an 8-month season of just repetitive regular season games over and over and over and over and over and over and over again until you finally got to a postseason where over half the league made the postseason. Like, you just wouldn't design it that way. I work in esports in my day job, as I've often talked about on here, and a big part of working in esports is ecosystem design. You're creating leagues from scratch, right, Justin? And as you know very well. But no, seriously, you're kind of creating leagues from scratch. You're creating competitive structures, schedules, etc. And a major thing that you'll see in esports is almost every esport has a series of major tournaments throughout the year. Like Call of Duty League, which is the client we work with, they're doing 5 big mid-season tournaments over the course of the year before their championship bracket. And like, those beats are really meaningful. They get everyone excited and kind of renews interest. And every esport that has to kind of start from scratch, anyone that tries to do like an extended regular season gets run out of the room. And I know esports are not sports, but I do think there's some interesting lessons to learn. Where you, especially working on the broadcast production side of things, where you're like, okay, we got another 16 weeks of pro league. How are we going to make this interesting? That's the question the NBA is trying to answer right now. And when you have major events and big tournaments to kind of create beats, it just is a nice pace changer and rhythm breaker and storyline generator. So like, yes, I know there's still work to be done on incentive structures to make this work. But I really do think it's not, even though I'll admit, like, it might not work. Maybe it needed more time in the oven. Maybe the NBA fan base wasn't quite ready for something like this. There's all sorts of reasons why things don't work when you try something new. But the idea that it's just a bad idea on its own merits, I just do not agree with, because I've seen in other ecosystems, including in real and traditional sports, WNBA, Premier League soccer, etc., that these things work in regular sports too. So like, I just think people should try. I would challenge folks to try to open their mind a little bit and see if this is fun. Because if it sucks, I think they'll bail on it in short order. But in the meantime, I'm gonna root for fun over some some orthodoxy that's like, well, I don't think it's a good idea, so I'm not gonna do. I saw someone tweet about boycotting it because they don't believe in cheap stunts. I'm like, wow, my God, you're a real warrior for the culture, brother. So yeah, just I this is my case to give it a shot, gang. I think it could be more fun than you think it will, and I think once you get into the Cavs are playing in a single elimination tournament or whatever it might be, and they minute the third round, like, tell me you're not going to care a little. Like, come on, we talk ourselves into February regular season basketball matchups all the time.
I mean, it's great timing. The Cavs are very good now, and we can maybe win multiple things in a year. That's great. I like that. I really don't have strong feelings for the in-season tournament. My big thought is looking at, I love that all NBA is positionless. Like, now we can pretty much resolve who the top 15 players are in a given season. I like that. I think that's good.
So much.
I like it. The 65 game limit for awards, I think it's a little arbitrary, and it goes back to my thing, which is,
can we stick on all NBA before we pivot to the game limit?
Okay, yeah. What are your thoughts?
I just think, I don't get why they went.
I recognize how risky it is to say what are your thoughts after that soliloquy, but proceed.
I know. Doesn't it feel a bit like a nuclear option to go from this very, very organized guard forward center to just whatever the top 15 guys are? Like, I just don't get why we didn't at least start with wing, guard, forward, like just backcourt, front court, like we do with like All-Star Game. So you can get a couple, so you don't have the center drama, because I feels like this whole thing just feels like you're solving for what if there's two really good centers, or what if there aren't three really good centers. And like, I just feel like that's a bit too nuclear of a choice, given like the historical context of like, okay, this, like, I mean, Simmons and Russillo on their pod, talked about it plenty, where they were like, it matters to be the best, one of the best two guards in the league in any given year. And it helps contextualize things. And I just hate the idea of losing that context. And Simmons kind of made the point, I don't know if you listened to that pod, but he also kind of made the point that the MVP top 5 list does what this is kind of looking to do. You just look at the voting, and now you don't get an award for, you don't get hardware like you do for being first team All NBA if you're the MVP runner up. But like, in terms of our ability to parse, what happened in a league year 30 years from now, I don't know. It felt a little bit like a bridge too far to me.
I don't think MVP top 5 necessarily tells you who the 5 best players are, right? Like, you get guys like Isaiah Thomas with Boston there that end up in the top 5 there, but you wouldn't necessarily say
he wasn't a top 5 player.
But I wouldn't say so. I'm
being a jerk.
No, I know what you're doing. I'll counter with this, and this actually isn't something that I've given a whole lot of thought to, but I do think that it makes it interesting looking at trends of the league, right? Where if you're doing it this way, where it's the top 15 players, who's the 5 best, who's 6 through 10, who's 11 through 15, you can start to see some of these trends throughout NBA history when you start looking back at it of, oh, like right now, centers are having a resurgence. Like we went from centers not mattering to the top players in the league. Like you got Embiid, you got Jokic, you got Giannis, right? Like you can start to see some of those trends start to form, and maybe it does shift to wing. Maybe is a real guard push, right, where we see guys like Darius and Donovan and all those guys really driving a lot of team success and getting accolades as a result of that. I think you can start to see the trends that way, and I get it, I guess, where it's like, oh, you're your first, second, or third best center, but I just don't think that that's that important, right? Like, it's not like anyone actually agrees in terms of consensus on that stuff anyways. And like those deviations, like the drop off from first to second center might be smaller than the drop off within the first team from first team center to first team guard. So I think it's a better representation of who's made the most impact, who is the best players that for any given season.
All right, I get it. I just think, I don't know. I'm a bit of a history buff on this one, and I just feel like, I feel like first team. I feel like the All NBA teams kind of only matter for history. In that regard, like you're just kind of breaking your precedent for, I don't know. I don't know. It just felt like the nuclear option. But let's move to the minimum limits that have been reported. Mm-hmm. I don't mind this one iota. I think this is going to have a lot of fun down the line effects. I do think I'm a little surprised I didn't see a 65 games in which you play at least 10 minutes or something like that to avoid the memorial the AC Green memorial 1 minute outing.
I want the Drew Holiday out there for tip off. I want that. I want these weird moments. I want Giannis throwing the ball off the backboard to get his triple double.
Here's the thing though. So if you're really worried, the reason you do this is because you're worried about this growing perception that is, I think, pretty close to reality that, hey, it stinks that all these star players aren't playing in games, and people are trying to go to games. And
thank you for saying it's close to reality, because I feel like too often like fans get gaslit where they're like, no, like this isn't happening.
No, it's awesome that
it doesn't matter that this is upsetting to you. No, like how fans feel matters,
of course. And I think that like you look at we know that a lot of, or we don't know, but it's been reported a lot of this is coming from the training staffs, and players are going to listen to training staffs, but maybe players are a little less incentivized to do so and are going to advocate like, hey, excuse me, I don't want to sit. I want to get all NBA honors. I want to be a defensive player of the year candidate or whatever it might be. I don't know exactly what awards are bound by the 65 game restriction in the reporting, but altogether, I think like there are some interesting down the line effects where we're just going to see our favorite players play more. Like, again, I would love to have some more guardrails, and I kind of think there's going to be some minute minimum
there's going to be so much more details than what we're getting in these like small leaks and tweets.
But I'm saying even if it's not in this CBA, I'll bet it's the next one to avoid those silly honorary starts or whatever. But ultimately, I think it's a good move in the right direction, and like, yeah, there's gonna be a few painful omissions that maybe don't reflect quality all the time. Like there's gonna be a great player who plays 63 games that has an awesome season that gets left off, but like, do the ends justify the means? I would say yes, and I'm excited to see how this all plays out. But mostly, bro, I'm just glad it doesn't seem like a lockout's coming. Lockouts are so brutal, and
ultimately, like, availability should matter, right? Like, availability should matter, and that's why Evan Mobley deserves to be Defensive Player of the Year over Jaren Jackson Jr. What I would add to this, Carter, and I agree with a lot of what you said, I do think sometimes this gets framed as player versus training staff or players versus coaches in terms of who rests, when really they're put into these situations where there isn't a good answer by the schedule makers. Like the Cavs had stretches where they played 4 games in 5 nights. That should not happen. you should not really have back-to-backs. And I'm fine with all of this if the league keeps taking these proactive steps to fix the schedule, to make things easier. They did a great job cutting down on travel this year overall. And I think there's further steps you can take. I don't think I've actually talked about this on the podcast, and I just want to get it out here into the universe because I think it's one of the rare times I've had a good idea. But I would love it, just because divisions don't really have a lot of meaning right now. I would love it if in the first 20 games of your season and the second or the last 20 games of your season, you play all of your division opponents twice. And at the start of the year, let's say Cleveland plays a 2-game series like we're about to have with Orlando, with Detroit. They host Detroit, then they play 2 games in Indy against Indy, then they play 2 in Milwaukee. And just at the start of the season, you kind of have these baseball series that reduce travel, and it happens within kind of your local division where you're not traveling as much at the start of the year and the end of the year. I think that helps build division rivalries. I think it creates a rhyme and a reason to when you're playing these teams and when you're having these 2-game series. And then at the end of the year, you alternate. If you hosted the first 2, you play on the road for the last 2, right? And these division games matter a lot for tiebreakers. And I think you can almost replicate a little bit of what football has with these divisional weeks by taking this approach. And I understand there's still going to be scheduling conflicts. That's why I say 8 out of the first 20. But I think it would be I like these baseball series. I like what we're about to do with the Orlando Magic. And I think it would be fun if you want to build rivalries within the division. Back-to-back games playing the same team are a great way to do it. It gives coaching staffs the opportunity to game plan. I was listening to the Wine and Goal radio podcast with Rafa and Joe, which everyone should be subscribing to, but they had an interview with JB and they were asking him about these 2-game series. And he was saying, nothing really prepares you for the playoffs, but it's a unique opportunity that they didn't have before in their back pocket. I think it's a great addition, and I'd like to see them build off of that as a means to cut down travel. And maybe it just comes down to, trimming some of the preseason away, starting the year a couple weeks earlier and limiting the amount of games you play in 1 week. Like maybe you're only playing 3 games in 1 week, right? And you're eliminating some of these back-to-back situations unless it's in the same city. Like I think there's ways that you can go about it so that training staffs and players aren't put in this position, because training staff is saying, hey, you got knee soreness right now, and if we play you 4 times in 5 days, we're risking your long-term health. We're risking our season as a team. We're risking your health and your ability in your career. Like, this isn't good for anybody. And I think too often it gets framed as players not wanting to play, or training staffs and their advanced analytics on health and all that kind of stuff, when really it comes down to the schedule. Because the game has evolved beyond where it was before, where you could play 3 on one side that just stand around because there's illegal defense rules, and you can just play 2 on 2. Like every single possession has 3 guys involved in the primary action with 2 guys running on the weak side. These guys are bigger, faster, stronger. They're colliding. It's just a different game. It's more taxing. These guys have so many miles on their bodies. And I think correcting the schedule first and giving these guys more rest rather than trimming the 82 or whatever, I think that is a logical first step to try to see if this does curb some of this. Because I think too often it gets unfairly put on the players, and I think too often it gets unfairly put on the teams.
I'm going to time both of our monologues and see who went longer. I think I definitely did. But nevertheless, I do think it's a very good idea, Justin. I think that the scheduling stuff is just so hard. I don't know if this is true or not. Obviously, NFL has it easier insofar as, like, they know they're only going to be playing on Sundays, and they're in football stadiums, which are just, like, booked less. But, like, people just do not understand what a logistical nightmare it is to book arenas. Not to continue to go back to my line of work and my day job, but, like, we have to try to get holds. If we want to do an arena show, you have to get holds like a year in advance. Because there's just so much traffic. I mean, even I got burned. I whined about the 8 p.m. start on Sunday's game against the Pacers, and people reliably informed me, like, yeah, the Monsters are playing the same day and they need time to flip the court over, or the ice over to the court. So it is a level of Tetris and Jenga that I'm thrilled I never have to play. But finding ways to creatively cut down, and it just seems like this is one of those things, to your point, that you kind of don't have to negotiate that hard because the incentive structure should be so aligned. The NBPA, as far as I'm concerned, shouldn't have to be like, how can we reduce back-to-backs? How can we make travel more palatable? Because the NBA should be just as invested in that to make sure that the product is as good as it can be. So really,
yeah, and especially to guarantee stars are going to be rested and that they're going to play it, right? Like I think it does benefit everybody.
Absolutely. So really, really glad that looks like Labor Peace is on the way, and we're going to get to watch our favorite team play uninterrupted. Because lockouts suck.
Yes, sir. And we're going to watch our favorite team take on the Orlando Magic tomorrow. Magic have been playing well, man. Like,
not a bad team.
People get used to seeing Orlando on the schedule and reacting differently than you did. I saw a tweet today. Over the last 53 games, Orlando was 29-24, and they're still
suck.
They're going to be getting a top 10 pick. They have cap space. We've heard them rumored for guys like Fred VanVleet and all that, a point guard to organize everything. Paolo's fantastic. Wendell Carter Jr. has been great. Franz is great. Markelle Fultz is a great story. Jalen Suggs has moments. Like, they've got talent. And this is a team that, like, moving forward, when we're looking at the Cavs and we're projecting forward, Orlando's a team that's going to be a problem at times, which is automatically bringing me back to that 2009 trauma. Thank God they play a little bit of a different style. But looking at this game against Orlando, I'm happy that Dean seems to at least be, a little bit more in the rotation, because you need size to combat this team. And like you said, Carter, I think you summed it up properly, where I'm kind of hoping for a split here, and I would really like it if they just got this first game, because then you have 10 days without any real kind of meaningful game, and you can kind of just take the precautionary approach.
Absolutely, brother. It's going to be a fun few days, and then we can put our nose to the grindstone and start prepping for playoffs, baby.
Oh, God, it's going to be a wild ride. We will be podcasting after Thursday's game against the Magic, so we'll be recapping that 2-game series. Big thanks to everyone that tuned in live on YouTube. We really do appreciate all the support you guys give. If you want to support us, like and subscribe. Click notification bell so you know when we're going live. If you're listening via podcast and you want to give us support, you leave us a rating, leave a review, subscribe, unsubscribe, resubscribe, and help cook those books. If you want to be part of Chase Down's exclusive Discord chat, send a screenshot of the review to chasedownpod@gmail.com. However you choose to support us, we really do appreciate it. Make sure you guys are staying safe out there. Until next time, go Cavs.